Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me on another coronavirus edition of my board game reviews. Hopefully you and your family are very healthy and are just enjoying all this time being locked up together, posting very creative TikTok videos, while also enjoying as many board games as possible. My name's Nick, and today I'll be talking about the board game Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle Defense Against the Dark Arts, a two-player competitive deck-building game. This game was published by The Op, formerly known as USAopoly, in 2019. No designer is listed on the box, and the gameplay time I would say is about 1 to 2 hours, although that's also not expressly listed on the box. The game, as noted in the title, is for 2 players. And as you may have guessed, this is related to the board game Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, a cooperative deck building game, which I happen to have already reviewed, and that video has been published already on the Talking Cardboard YouTube channel. So definitely after watching this video, please check out that review as well, as I do draw some comparisons between this game and that game. I'll tell you now the main differences are the fact that this is a 2-player game, whereas the cooperative version was a 2 to 4-player game. This game also is competitive opposed to cooperative as was the original game. And finally, the scope of the Harry Potter theme is much different. In Defense Against the Dark Arts, you're focused on just the part of the books where all the students are learning how to defend themselves against the dark arts and are actually doing each other or practicing doing each other in Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Whereas in the cooperative version of this game, you actually are experiencing all 7 books of the Harry Potter series. So a much broader, I guess, approach to reliving the Harry Potter theme. With that said, I'll give my thoughts on which game I feel is actually more thematic, per se, and at the end of this video. So stay tuned for that. There also are some other differences in how the games play, and I'll explain that as well. So without further ado, I'll start with giving an overview of this game and then wrap up with my final thoughts. So here I have a game of Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, Defense Against the Dark Arts, set up and ready to go. First, I just want to go over the objective of this game, which is to be the first to stun your opponent 3 times. In the game, you, as a player, are represented by a House Mover token that goes on the start space of this practice mat, and then your opponent would also be a House Mover token on the other start space of the practice mat. And as the game goes on, you will be taking damage, attack damage, and for every damage you take, you have to move your House Mover token that many spaces to the end of the practice mat. So if you took 1 point of damage, you have to move your token 1 space. If you took 2 points of damage, for example, you have to go 2 spaces, etc., until you get to this stun space. And when you get to the stun space, you unfortunately will have to take a stun marker and add that to the stun section of your house card. So you can see all these house cards have 3 stun marker silhouettes. So when you take a stun marker, you place that there to keep track of how many times you've been stunned. And once you've been stunned 3 times, you would lose and your opponent would win. And that's essentially how the game, the objective of the game. Now, you can also gain health on this track. So if you were to, let's say your House Mover token was there and you played cards to gain 1 health, you would move your counter that much closer to the start space. Or let's say you played cards to get 2 health back, and you can move your token all the way to the start space. And then once you're at the start space, though, you can't gain any more health than that. That's the maximum health you can have, or stamina, or whatever that's trying to simulate. So the first thing you and your opponent will have to do when playing this game is decide what house you want to play as. And real quick, wanted to go over these tokens. So there's 4 different tokens used in this game. The first ones are these metal stun marker tokens, which I just explained how those are used. Then there's these heart tokens, which represent health tokens. The lightning bolt tokens represent attack damage. And then these coin tokens represent influence. So that's what tokens are. Then every other component of the game is essentially cards that you will be playing with. So the first thing you have to do is decide which house you want to play as, and each of these house cards actually are double-sided, which would mean each player could be the same house, which I don't think makes a lot of sense since you're, I think, supposedly dueling students from different houses. But that's, I guess, beside the point. So you have these house cards. You pick one. So let's say this player decides they want to be Ravenclaw. So they take the Ravenclaw house card. And I do want to point out, each house card actually has the same text on them. So the house that you choose doesn't immediately give you special abilities. It will allow you to potentially have future different abilities, which I'll explain in a minute. Anyway, this house card serves as your card to keep track of how many times you've been stunned. It also serves as a reference card to help you keep track of what you're supposed to do during your turn. So that can just go down in front of you. And then each player will have 9 of the same, for sure 9 of the same starting cards in their starting deck. 7 of those starting cards will be these Alohomora cards, which give you 1 influence. And fun fact, Alohomora is a spell that unlocks doors. And I just started watching the Harry Potter movies again with my girlfriend recently, and had forgotten that's what that spell did. So thought that was kind of cool. But and then wand, each player will get a wand, which does 1 attack damage, and then each player gets a cauldron, which either gives 1 influence or 1 heart or health. And then each player will decide on 1 ally that they will have in their starting deck. There's 3 allies to choose from, but for each ally there's actually 2 cards. So that means, again, each player could have the same ally if they really wanted to. And these allies provide minor abilities such as gain 1 health for the toad, allow you to carry over influence from one turn to the next for the owl, or deal 1 damage for the cat. So let's just say the Ravenclaw player wants the cat ally. Now they have their starting deck of 10 cards. You go ahead and shuffle that starting deck, and then can place it to the left side of your house card to keep things organized, and then the right side can serve as your discard pile. Keep in mind your opponent is going through the same process, so they would have now picked a house card, they would have picked an ally, they would have shuffled their draw deck as well, and you now are both ready to start the game. One thing to point out is the rules actually don't specify who gets to start the game. So I guess that means you can decide randomly based on a coin flip or a die roll, or some other random generation method, or something more creative, or another competition altogether to determine who starts the game. But find out who the starting player is, and then that player will go first. So in this game, we'll say the Ravenclaw player will go first. And actually already you would have had drawn your starting 5 cards. Then the Ravenclaw player would just start playing the cards from their hand and apply the effects the card state. So, for example, if the Alohomora card gives you 1 influence and the player has 2 of those, so they would play those Alohomora cards and then take 2 influence to show that they've acquired at least 2 influence this turn. They have their cat ally card. Ally cards are unique in this game compared to the at least cooperative version of Hogwarts Battle, in that when you play them, they actually stay out on the table. So typically when you play any of these item cards or spell cards, once you play them, they go to your discard pile. But ally cards actually will stay out on the table. And you also then, on the same turn you play that ally card, get to apply its effect. So in this case, the cat gives the player 1 damage. And now for every future turn, this card will automatically be on the table and apply, and you get to take advantage of that effect from here on out. And if you've ever played Star Realms, I would say these cards are very reminiscent of Outposts from Star Realms, with the difference is that these cards don't absorb damage. When your opponent attacks you, they still attack your player token directly, not your ally. But essentially, it's allies will stay out on the board and help you gain a lot of effects as time goes on if you continue to play more and more allies. And there's no limit, I think, to the number of allies you can have out on the table. So continuing with the rest of the hand for the Ravenclaw player. We have the wand, which simply deals one or gain 1 attack damage, and then finally a cauldron, which allows you to either gain 1 influence or gain 1 health. And when you're at full health, you can't gain any more health. So gaining a health wouldn't really help the Ravenclaw player, so they'll go ahead and just take 1 more influence. So now they've collected all of their effect tokens, and we'll go ahead and use them. So with the 2 attack damage they've acquired, they'll move their opponent's House Mover token 2 spaces towards their opponent's end of the practice mat. Then they'll figure out how they want to spend their 3 influence. So up here, we have this classroom section, which includes these 5 cards that the Ravenclaw player could choose to purchase if they have enough influence to do so. So you can see the bottom right is the cost and influence of these classroom cards. And right now, the only one that the Ravenclaw player could purchase is this Crystal Ball card, which says they can draw a card and then discard any 1 card. Alternatively, players always have the ability to purchase cards from the library deck, which is all the same card called Books. And you can see that the game gives you plenty of these. And Books simply allow you to either gain 2 influence when you would play them, or draw a card and return this card to the library. So essentially, this is kind of an early game card that allows you to gain influence to hopefully buy more expensive cards. And then when you feel your deck is getting stronger, you can simply choose this option, which allows you to draw a card from your deck and then just put this card back to the library, much how you would normally rent a book out from the library and then return it at some point. So we'll say the Ravenclaw player decides they feel they could take advantage of, getting some books and gaining more influence in future turns. So they would add that to their discard pile. And now their turn is done. So they'll take the cards they played and any cards they acquired from the classroom or the library and put it in their discard pile, and then draw a new hand of 5 cards from their draw pile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there you go. A bunch of great OMR cards, so they can unlock plenty of doors in this next turn. Then whenever you have to draw cards and you have no cards there to draw, you would take your discard pile, shuffle it, and then draw however many cards you need to finish your draw action. And then the other player would now take their turn, play their 5 cards, and back and forth until one player's token is all the way to the stun section of the practice mat. At that point, the player who got stunned would take a stun marker, and then players reset, meaning both players would move their tokens to the start space of the practice mat. Also, both players would take any cards they had in their draw pile, any cards they had in their discard pile, any allies they had on the table, put them together, and then shuffle them and have a brand new draw deck. So what that means is as each round goes on, players will have stronger starting decks to play with, and therefore the assumption would be that the rounds will go quicker or more fast as time goes on, since players are going to have stronger decks and stronger cards that can deal more damage, etc. So that is essentially how the game works. A few things that I want to mention in a little more detail. One is house abilities. So as I mentioned, these house cards don't immediately give you any real benefit when you pick a house at the start of the game. However, certain cards will have a bottom section that corresponds to a specific house, and then next to that is an ability. When you play this card, the player will only get that ability if they have chosen that specific house at the beginning of the game. So in this case, this is a Ravenclaw ability. So if I were to play this card, I would have the option to also then use this ability at the bottom, which allows me to draw 2 cards, then discard any 1 card. So it's a pretty strong. Usually these abilities are actually pretty strong, and maybe even stronger than the standard ability for the card. So that's really where these house cards then are useful. Now, that's not the only way you can use these abilities. Alternatively, let's say I was the Gryffindor player. I'm going to put the Gryffindor house card in front of me, and I played this card. If I happen to have an ally, so maybe on a previous turn I had acquired Cho Chang. If I had acquired a ally on a previous turn had it out on the table, or even the same turn and had it already out on the table before playing this card, that matches the house of the card I'm playing, I also still get to use this house ability. So there's two ways that you can take advantage of house abilities. Either having an ally that matches the house ability of the card you're playing, or simply having chosen the house card at the beginning of the game that matches the house ability of the card you're playing. So house abilities definitely are way the cards are interacting in this game, and are definitely important to keep track of if you want to win. Another card I've yet to talk about are these hex cards. So certain item and spell and probably ally cards will place these hex cards in your opponent's hand or discard pile. So for example, this card states opponents put a hex in their discard pile, and then you would get a draw card. So for example, if someone played that card on me, I would have to take the top card from this hex deck and put it in my discard pile. Hex cards are always bad. You never want to have to worry about hex cards. And as you can see in the reference, the reference area of your house card, the very first step on your turn is actually resolving any hexes. So if I happen to at some point need to reshuffle my deck, and now I have this hex card in my draw deck, I draw up to 5 cards, and well, wouldn't you know, I have a hex card. So the very first thing that I would have to do on my turn now is actually apply the effects of this hex card, which says you cannot gain any damage or health this turn, then banish this hex. In this case, it wouldn't matter because I happen to draw 4 more Alohomora cards, meaning 4 more things I can unlock, which is awesome. But that's, of course, not always the case. Sometimes you actually get cards that maybe deal a lot of damage or give you a lot of health, and those instances, and this would be a really bad hex card to have to deal with. A lot of the hex cards will say banish after you play it. So banish is now what I'll talk about next. That's an area next to the practice mat where cards basically that are now out of the game will go. And certain cards will specifically allow you to banish cards from certain areas of the game area. So, for example, this spell states you may banish a card from your discard pile and from the classroom. So let's say I have my discard pile over here, and I want to get rid of, I'm done unlocking things, so I want to get rid of one of these Alohomora cards and banish it. Well, now it's completely out of the game. I never have to worry about drawing that Alohomora card again. So banishing, number one, allows you to get rid of weaker cards from your hand and deck over time to make a much stronger deck where you have only the higher value cards that you really want to be using. Alternatively, let's say my opponent just took their turn. They played the card that required me to place this hex into my discard pile. Now it's my turn, and I play this card, which allows me to banish a card from your discard pile. Well, it just so happens I have that hex in my discard pile. I could just go ahead and banish that and never even have to worry about it being in my hand to begin with, and therefore don't have to worry ever about dealing with those negative effects. So banishing can be defensive in that it allows you to get rid of hex cards that are in your discard pile or your hand or wherever on the board. But also it can help you make your deck, like I said, more efficient as time goes on. And I think that kind of covers every aspect or rule of the game in at least some level of detail. So with that said, I'll move on and give you my final thoughts on this game.
So what did I think of this game? Well, the first thing that really, I would say, stood out to me was the theme. I thought this game was actually very thematic and connected me to the Harry Potter theme much better than the cooperative version of Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle did. The whole premise of this game is your students that are learning for the first time how to actually defend yourselves against the dark arts. So you're going to start the game without much skill, and that's how you felt in the game. Or, you know, in the books and movies, these students really didn't have a lot of skills, and that's how you feel in this game as well. In that your card choices are very limited. You have all these great Alohomora cards to start with, which really can't do much for you, and then a few other weak cards that aren't going to really do a lot. And over time, you have to build that experience and knowledge of how to do more during your turn, which again, I thought felt much like it probably would have been in movies and books. Also, in addition to that, to really, I would say, add to that, experience of getting better was just the library deck itself. And these book cards that you can take to help you gain more influence early in the game, and then later on put back and return to the library deck. It just made me think of a student, of course, from Hogwarts going to the library, taking a card to learn about whatever, and then later on returning that book and, maybe picking out a book again, but whatever. I just thought that was very thematic. I also like the visual aspect of seeing your player token move, towards your end of the practice mat and feeling all kind of like, oh, I'm about to get stunned, but then healing yourself, getting back, maybe pushing your opponent back to their end. So this nice tug of war aspect, and I kind of felt again that connected well to the theme of these students, on this practice mat fighting back and forth, and the hex cards as well. I thought those were implemented very effectively in that at some point you might have a hex unexpectedly show up in your hand, and then you have to deal with it, and that kind of throws your whole turn off. And again, probably much like it would have been dealing with students on a practice mat in the actual books or movies. You might eventually get a spell that knocks you off your track or course and whatever. And so I really like that. The theme in general I thought was captured well. The one thing that kind of ties into the theme that I maybe wish was different was the house card, or choosing what house you play as, in that it didn't initially give you any kind of benefit over your opponent. And so I wish there was more asymmetry in regards to choosing your house faction at the start of the game. Maybe in my mind, a way to improve this or change this would have been when you pick a house card, you also get one ally from that specific house instead of just the generic allies like the owl, cat, and whatever the last thing was, toad. Now, I don't think that changed the gameplay experience that much. It just would have made, like I said, the theme maybe it would have improved the theme in my mind a little bit, that you're not just getting some generic card that really doesn't change anything. But other than that, I thought the theme was very strong in this game. With that said, when it comes to gameplay, it seemed a little long. I think my girlfriend and I took a full hour to finish one round of this game. And like I think I mentioned, you could have up to 5 rounds in Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle Defense Against the Dark Arts if each player gets done twice, and then the 5th round would determine the winner. So I'm not saying this game takes 5 hours. You do get better cards after the first round, and that helps maybe improve the gameplay time of the subsequent rounds. But I don't think this game should be taking that long. I think this game is should be, a 30-minute to 1 hour game, because it's supposed to be, in my mind, a mass appeal game. The publishing company, the Op, is, known for their USAopoly games, and more mass appeal types games. And I think this should be no different. This is for Harry Potter fans that want a fun gaming experience. Most Harry Potter fans want to play a 2-hour Harry Potter game. They probably would be fine with a 30-minute to 1 hour game. So in that regard, I think the game could have had some rework to it. I don't really know how it could have been changed, but so often, especially in that first round, you felt like every turn you damaged the opponent, they were just going to get that health right back. And I think part of that was because we each picked the ally card that gives you 1 health. So in that case, maybe that ally card shouldn't be in the game, or should be revised somehow in how it works. But by us both having that health, the toad, was it? I think, yeah, the toad is what gives you 1 health. It really kept the game going longer than maybe it otherwise would have. But then I think that's something that should have been accounted for by the designers. And it unfortunately then kind of took away the fun of the game, because, we felt maybe after 30 minutes, okay, well, this is going on forever. When's it going to end? And to even get my girlfriend to play the additional rounds to actually finish the game, I think I had to convince her with Taco Bell or Chipotle or both maybe, because she, the first game kind of left her exhausted. So unfortunately, that's something that, kind of maybe left a sour taste in my mouth. And interestingly, it was something I would say was a big drawback of the cooperative version of this game. And in both cases, gameplay time wasn't
listed on the box of either the competitive version or the cooperative version, and that may have been intentional now that the designers realized this game was maybe a little longer than they wanted to bother stating on the box. So take that for what you will. I'm not trying to say that this was a bad game by any means. I still think it was at least an alright game, if not a good game. The mechanics were sound, I thought, and the rulebook was very clearly written, besides the one aspect of not really specifying who the starting player was, which I would like to think was just an omission, because I've never really seen a game not specify who starts the game. They do specify who starts subsequent rounds. I think the player who got stunned gets to choose if they want to go first or not, but they didn't specify who actually goes first in the very first round. But with that said, all the other aspects of the game seem fine to me. Like I said, strong theme, component quality, good enough. It's, like I said, kind of a mass appeal game, so I wasn't expecting super high quality components anyway, and they're good enough for this game. The playing your cards, it felt like a traditional deck building game. The addition of the ability to banish cards was great. The great improvement from the cooperative version of Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. So with that said, definitely check this game out if you're a Harry Potter fan. I think you'll connect to the theme if you, like I did. Let's be honest, you probably don't have a lot to do at home right now as it is, so why not check this game out? And also, don't forget to check out then my video for the cooperative version of this game, which is, again, already uploaded on the Talking Cardboard YouTube channel, Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, a cooperative deck building game. Since, like I said, both games are very similar, it might come down to whether you want a competitive play experience or cooperative play experience, because I know I personally always lean towards wanting to play a cooperative game. But with that said, I think for this particular game, I'd rather play the actual competitive version, and maybe you would feel the same as well. So with that said, thank you so much for taking time to watch this video. I appreciate it. Hope to see you guys again soon. Bye.